my name is Teron Surrett, and this is my OCD video for the assignment in Module 7. In this module, we had to respond to the Samantha Pina TED Talk on living with OCD and answer or respond to 3 little points in that assignment section. She actually confirmed and dispelled a lot of my knowledge on OCD. She kind of confirmed the part where, yes, it was compulsive disorder. You kind of couldn't stop it. It was an obsessive thing, and you did have to be organized to a point. But she also let me know that it was so much more than that. If one side of your body touched something, the other side had to. It was about also being symmetrical. I didn't realize that there were so many different levels to being OCD. I honestly thought that it was just, maybe being color coordinated or having things organized or being neat, having things clean, or things done just a certain specific way. But that is a part of it in some form. But it's so much more than that, and I did not realize that it affected someone's life so much that she had to go so far as to correct what other people did, such as shake her hand or pat her on the back, or if she bumped into something, she had to bump into it on the other side to make it even. I just didn't realize that it had such a physical effect on your body and on your mind that you had to do that. So I learned a lot in that perspective, and I was just amazed. It blew my mind to actually hear it from somebody who suffered with that. So it was really interesting to learn. And then the last little part there says, what are some biological, psychological, and social variables you will pay attention to if you encounter a client with OCD? So for the biological part, I know that Samantha talked about if things got out of order or in a way she didn't like it, her heart would start racing and she would get really anxious. That could be something that you could discuss with them to maybe see, if that happened when something got out of order or out of line where they didn't like it or anything like that. Also, when I was looking up kind of some stuff about OCD just because I was interested, I learned that it's a familial disorder. I don't know if I said that right, but it can run in families. Maybe not necessarily genetically, maybe a learned behavior. I'm not exactly sure. They didn't specify on how that worked. I didn't dig that far into it, but that could also be something you could discuss. If they have seen someone else in their family do that, they may be familiar with, the behaviors of it. May not actually know that it has a name or a diagnosis, but they can know that it is something real. So that could be something that you could discuss on the biological side of that. Also, I learned that there's some infections and inflammations that can cause some children to have an onset of OCD. That was really interesting. I don't know if it just has kind of an effect on their brain and how things work. Like I said, I didn't dig too deep into that, but that was also an interesting thing that you could talk about. Say if you were talking to a mother about a concern of her child being OCD, that would be something that you could discuss to see if that was a possibility, maybe. Just one of those things. Then psychological, the behaviors and rituals, like I was talking about earlier. If someone shook Samantha's hand, she'd have to go back and shake her other hand, or if someone patted her on the back on this side, she'd have to go pat herself on that side. She said her notebooks had to be color coordinated, and she had to iron her papers or her notes if they got wrinkled. She couldn't have them handwritten. She had to go home and type them up. just because she had to have them neat and organized that way. Although it did help her in the end, that's still some rituals and compulsive behaviors that are signs of OCD. So you could talk to the client about that and pay attention to see if they are performing any of those rituals or compulsive disorders, and just see, if that's some of the things that they're dealing with. Because if they don't know what they have and they don't know how to deal with that, that can be probably pretty frustrating. Trying to figure out, why you can't stop yourself from doing these things that no one else is doing, or that doesn't seem important to anyone else. And that's another thing too. There's some on a cognitive theory part of that is people with OCD can often misinterpret their thoughts. That's another thing I found out while I was looking through some of that stuff. So for us, if something's crooked or something, we're like, oh, if we don't have OCD, we can just push that thought aside and be fine. Well, someone with OCD may not be able to push that thought aside, and it just takes over, and they have to deal with that. So they just can't kind of compartmentalize where things are, or I don't know how to say that. The example that was given in the research I looked at was about an infant, maybe a parent under a lot of stress at the time after a newborn infant may think about harming the infant. Well, someone without OCD can push that thought aside and say, no, I can't do that. Well, someone with OCD may not be able to push that aside and may seriously contemplate doing that just because they can't. They'll misinterpret their thoughts. They don't. The cognitive theory says that they misinterpret their thoughts. So I'm not really sure how that worked. I just thought that was interesting, and I'd like to look more into that, because that's kind of the only place I saw that, so I'm not really sure about that one. But that was just one psychological thing that I saw. I don't know how you would kind of pay attention to that with a client. I guess you could see if you were having a conversation with them, maybe intentionally put something crooked on your desk and to see if that kind of bothered them or they kept staring at it or something. Social factors or social variables could be environmental stressors, like are they going through a lot? Did they lose a job, or are they struggling financially? Traumatic brain injuries can set or be an onset of OCD. And back to that, that OCD can run in the families. That familial disorder, that can also be a social factor. If you as a child see your parents doing these actions, you may repeat them, and it may just become a ritual or a habit that you do yourself. So I guess you would just need to get a history on the client to know most of these things. Just maybe a basic interview or mental health assessment, something like that, just to pay attention to. You'd have to have something to give you kind of an idea of why you'd need to be looking for OCD, or why you would have an idea of why that client would or might have this disorder. But anyways, this was a very interesting video and assignment, and I did learn a lot from it. I love watching TED Talks. I actually got on a little rabbit trail when I was watching hers. I could watch them all day. So anyways, that is the majority of what I've learned and what I need to do for this assignment, I think. So thank you, and that's it.